What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and let's talk about Obi-Wan Kenobi episodes 1 and 2. I mean, this is gonna have spoilers, but I imagine by the time this video goes out, most everybody would have seen the first 2 episodes anyway. You know, it's cool, but it's starting off a little slower than I thought it would. Here's one of the funny things about this, and I think in a lot of ways you're being a little too careful. So Obi-Wan Kenobi as a character doesn't really need to be established. And that's one of the things that I do like. They don't really establish who Obi-Wan Kenobi is and all that kind of stuff. It really just kind of picks up with this idea that things are bad, man. The Jedi are basically all but extinct, right? There aren't really any Jedi left anymore. In a lot of ways, for those of you guys who ever played Knights of the Old Republic 2, it feels a lot like that, right? In the aftermath of the Jedi Civil War between Revan and Malak against, the Jedi themselves, it feels very similar to that, right? The aftermath, things are bleak, there's a kind of hopelessness that lingers in the air. I do like that tone, and I like that feeling. That being said, there are some things that go on here that just don't really seem to matter. Like the whole story of Leia Organa, right? Like the whole story of here's what Princess Leia was doing. And episode number 2, basically being Obi-Wan essentially performing a side quest in order to get Leia. I mean, it's okay, but if I'm being honest, and I think a lot of people kind of feel like this, there isn't really a whole lot to Leia that's interesting, which kind of sucks, because for those of you guys who ever read the Marvel Star Wars comics, the recent ones that they put out, where they basically tie into the movies and take place between the movies and all that kind of stuff, one of the things they hit on is that Leia was Force sensitive. Even though they never really explored it, never really did anything with it, there's one point where she goes to Naboo, and she enters into the room, I think, where Obi-Wan Kenobi had fought Darth Maul, and where it was believed that he had killed Darth Maul, and she actually senses the presence of Darth Maul through the Force, but then turns away from it and decides not to actually tune into the Force and awaken those Force-sensitive abilities. It's not really something that it seems like they're leaning into here, which kind of makes sense since those comics take place so long. They take place after episode 4. Assuming they're maintaining that continuity, you won't really see that here in the show. But Leia as a little girl, it was never really anything that I was interested in. I was never ever really watching the Star Wars movies and just kind of I wonder what life was like for Leia when she was younger. If anything, I was really wanting to see how Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles became friends, or different things along those lines, which is kind of ironic because for this show, Obi-Wan Kenobi spent pretty much all of his time on Tatooine, as far as we're aware, just the existing continuity and all that kind of stuff. And you do see Tatooine for a little while, but you see Luke Skywalker once. And it's kind of okay, so that's weird. I mean, I kind of get where they're coming from. There isn't a whole lot you can do with Luke Skywalker working on, Uncle Owen's evaporator farm, right? I mean, what are you gonna show him doing, right? I mean, there's not a whole lot that you can do there. So I kind of get that to a degree. But even then, this idea of tracking down, Princess Leia, basically, where she'd been captured and so on and so forth, it seems a little unnecessary. I will say, though, that since we got that, I feel like they missed a fantastic opportunity to bring in Nar Shaddaa. For those of you guys who don't know what Nar Shaddaa is, it's often referred to as the Smuggler'S Moon, but it's actually a moon that basically orbits Nal Hutta, the home of the Hutts themselves, and it's the crime place, right? Imagine that Mos Eisley, you'll never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Imagine that's a whole moon. And that's Nar Shaddaa. One of the seediest places you could possibly imagine. Instead, they took her to Dwayu, I think is how you pronounce it. I can't remember exactly how they pronounce it in the show. It's a planet, not a moon, so it doesn't seem like it's Nar Shaddaa. But regardless, it's, again, the whole thing with Princess Leia just felt unnecessary, right? It felt like they were just kind of trying to kill time and that kind of thing. I will say I'm a little confused. Is the show about Obi-Wan Kenobi or is it about Reva? But I'm not complaining, because I gotta say, man, Reva seems pretty badass. I'm really digging her as a character. She's certainly one of my favorites. I mean, I do love the fact that whatever her grudge is with Obi-Wan Kenobi, which I'm really excited to find out, whatever that grudge is, man, it harbors one hell of a vendetta, because it's I don't know, it's if it really is a basic motivation, right? Because in the show, there is a point where they're like, her goal is to gain favor. And literally she says, like, I'm not going to kill you, Obi-Wan Kenobi. I'm going to bring you in to Lord Vader, right? Darth Vader has been looking for you for a long time. And she's the one that reveals that Anakin Skywalker is basically Darth Vader, which is a little strange to me. And we'll talk about that here in a second. But like, if it really is that basic of a motivation that she's just vying for more power and she simply just wants to bring Obi-Wan Kenobi in, I'm going to be a little disappointed. I mean, I understand it. It falls directly in line with Sith philosophy, so I can't really be upset about it. But I feel like it would be a little bit lackluster because I feel like she has a motivation that's deeper than that, right? She has just an anger and a hatred that's much deeper than that. I will say they're also just looking at the nature of her character and the fact that things are a little ambiguous, the fact that like she hasn't been destroyed yet. Obviously, she's going to be a major player in the show. To be quite frank, having seen shows like this before, she has all the trappings of a person who's going to turncoat and join the light side. That's really what it looks like. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't fully know, but it looks like that. Having said that, I am really excited about her character. I mean, the fact that she killed like the Grand Inquisitor, right? He was in this show for like an episode and 3/4, basically. Like she killed that dude, and it's just like, wow. And the funny thing is, knowing the Sith the way I know them, just from having read Star Wars and so on and so forth, I don't really think that Vader's gonna care. Because at the end of the day, Vader just cares about results. He doesn't really care how those results are gained, so long as what you do doesn't like impede what it is he's trying to achieve. Like, if she had freaked out and killed Obi-Wan Kenobi, then yeah, Vader would probably kill her, right? He'd probably torture her to death, and then like that would be the end of Reva. But the fact that she killed a Grand Inquisitor, if she did that and then brought Obi-Wan Kenobi to Lord Vader, he would just be like, good job. Or he would say it in a way that only Lord Vader can say it in, that kind of a thing. But he wouldn't really care the fact that the Grand Inquisitor is dead. And I don't really even think the Emperor would care, right? As long as the ultimate goal was achieved. If anything, they would just write the Grand Inquisitor off as just being weak and not keeping his guard up in the face of someone like Reva, who was obviously vying for his position. So they would just really consider his death to be well-deserved. But having said that, one of the things that kind of sticks with me and seems really, really strange here is that Reva knows that Anakin Skywalker is Darth Vader. And what's so crazy about this is it's in the Star Wars universe, it's like one of the best kept secrets, right? Until the death of Darth Vader, and you get into the aftermath of Episode 7, at least in the expanded universe anyway, no one knew that Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker. Like, no one ever really knew that, at least not that I'm aware of. Like, the Emperor knew, obviously Anakin himself knew, which is always kind of weird to know that he knew that, but to refer to Anakin as a different person, you know, because I guess that's just the person he used to be, whereas he's Lord Vader now, right? Just kind of the nature of that. Obviously, Obi-Wan Kenobi knows, but virtually nobody knows. And it's kind of weird that for Reva, if she knows, and she's considered the least of all the Inquisitors, they would also have to know. Now, it could just be one of those things because they mentioned in the show, at least Obi-Wan Kenobi does, that the Inquisitors were once Jedi who had fallen to the dark side, that perhaps they knew and they passed that information on. But at the same time, most people seem to believe Anakin Skywalker was killed. Even if you go and you read the in-continuity comics right now, there's a point in the Darth Vader series when he goes on this mission to find out what actually happened to Padme because he doesn't believe Emperor Palpatine when Palpatine says that Padme was basically killed by Anakin Skywalker, right? Killed by Vader himself. That he goes and investigates. He eventually comes across her handmaidens, and her handmaidens believe that both Anakin and Padme were killed by Darth Vader. So almost no one really seems to know that Vader and Anakin are the same person. So I find that a little strange, and even if it is one of those things where by some mystery she somehow knows, I don't really know how I feel about that, because I love the idea that Anakin and Vader being the same person, but this being like a ridiculously well-kept secret, one that's so well-kept that those who learn about it would actually end up being killed. I really love that idea, right? I really love that whole thing. Again, there's nothing being taken away from the show by this, right? It's not as though the show is somehow diminished because Reva knows that Anakin is Darth Vader. But, you know, it's just something that just doesn't quite, it kind of rubs me the wrong way. Having said that, I do love that we got to see Vader in that moment. You know, once I was about maybe a quarter of the way through episode 2, I was like, okay, we're not going to see Vader in this episode. Given everything that's happening and how it's transpiring, we're not really going to see like Darth Vader showing up in all his glory in this episode. That's not really going to happen. If anything, it'll end up just being a scene at the very end of the show. And then, of course, that turned out to be the case. I think this is a good move. I think it's a great decision on behalf of Disney and them, because if they had shown their hand too early, right? If they had revealed their hand too early, it would have taken away from the suspense, because we're all kind of waiting for that duel between Anakin and Darth Vader, which, as I understand, is supposed to happen in the show. You know, I'm excited to see that. And I think most everybody's excited to see that too. And kind of prolonging that and kind of allowing things to build up seems pretty cool. But again, I think a lot of that goes back to the nature of Reva and the fact that they're focusing very heavily on her character and presumably the vendetta or the grudge that she holds against Obi-Wan Kenobi that goes deeper than her just trying to work her way up the ranks of the Sith to, you know, maybe the second in command to Darth Vader, right? Or the first in command of Darth Vader, or whatever the case happens to be, right? It's his right hand, so to speak. Again, we don't fully know what her motivations are. I am excited to find out. That being said, again, you know, the first 2 episodes largely feel like filler episodes. It seems like a lot of stuff that happened in the first 2 episodes just wasn't really necessary. It felt like they were just kind of killing time, finding a reason to create 6 episodes. I think there are other things they could have done in here besides focusing on that. One of the things that I would have loved to have seen that I thought would have been very, very fascinating here is to show us what Obi-Wan Kenobi was doing between the end of episode 3 and this, right? Like, we know that Obi-Wan Kenobi took the kids to Tatooine and he dropped the kids off, and that basically seemed to be it. But I would like to have believed that there was a little more going on to Obi-Wan Kenobi than that even if we don't necessarily see that at the very least, you know, whether he was using the Force or what have you, we get a glimpse into what else was happening. We get that momentarily, right? Like literally when those clones come running in, guns blazing, and just mow down everybody. Right? I mean, you know, I guess I shouldn't laugh at that, but like, I mean, we kind of get that moment, right? And those younglings take off, and it's like we run. It's like, well, you're gonna die because like literally Anakin's gonna come in there and kill all of you. So you know, it sucks to see that you're running to your own death. But you know, I think it would have been cool to try to find a way to add those little tidbits in, right? To add those little things in, you know, where we kind of get a little more about what Obi-Wan Kenobi was doing, or a little bit more about what was going on with the Jedi outside of that. Because even for me, it feels like a bit of a stretch that Obi-Wan Kenobi would take Luke Skywalker to Tatooine, he would give Princess Leia to the Organa family, and then just totally deaden himself to the use of the Force, right? Like, I mean, on a personal level, I'd be kind of curious, man. I'd be like, I mean, what's going on out there? You know, that kind of a thing. But at the same time, again, this is really more just nitpicking and more just personal preference. But one of the other things that I really did love about this show is that it wasn't Obi-Wan Kenobi just using the Force all the time. They really maintain that element of him basically saying like, I need to lay low because the Jedi are everywhere and there's a huge bounty on us. And I could be like assassinated and killed before I heard the sound that killed me, you know? And so if for no other reason than the fact that I just don't want to die, I got to keep a low profile. It's one of the things that I really think is kind of it sort of flies under the radar, but I think it's one of the absolute best things about the show so far, because while you look at the Star Wars movies, you kind of tend to see Jedi not necessarily as like these indestructible, you know, invincible beings who exist out there that use this all-encompassing godly power called the Force, and it turns into like a plot device that lets them do whatever they want to do at any particular point in time. I will say that we have this tendency to see Jedi who use the Force as being ridiculously capable in comparison to just a normal person, and rightfully so, because they are. But when you know, if you look at the video game KOTOR 2, right, Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic 2, there's a really good point where the character Traya, by the way, spoiler for a 15, 20-year-old game, there's a point where Kreia, who turns out to be a Sith Lord, is actually talking to the Exile, right, the main character of the game. And she's saying that if you take the Force and lightsabers away from the Jedi, then what are they? Right, they're nothing more than the weakest people you've ever seen fumbling around with like a blaster or something like that. With this, I think it shows us just how capable Obi-Wan Kenobi is, that even in utilizing the Force only really once in any real measure when he, you know, keeps Leia from falling to the ground, he's still able to pull things off, right? He's still able to use espionage, subterfuge. It's obvious he's a bit rusty, right, with his fighting style. I mean, looked a little rough, and I like how they played into it, right? I mean, obviously, Ewan McGregor is not as young as he was when he was doing episodes 1, 2, and 3, so there's the real-life age factor that goes into that. He can't quite move the same way. I love that they leaned into that, where he's like, it's been 10 years. I'm not the Jedi I used to be. You know, I'm rusty, man, you know, and I'm not as capable. I love that they built that in because that goes strongly towards Obi-Wan Kenobi in episode 4. And that was one of the big things that I was always curious about, that you saw Obi-Wan Kenobi in episode 3 with just this extravagant and albeit amazing lightsaber duel with Anakin. And it's like, how do we go from that Obi-Wan Kenobi to like old man Ben, who obviously is not fighting anywhere near the same capacity when he faced off against Vader in episode 4. And so it's like, how do you get to that? Is it really just age? Like, does a Jedi's ability to utilize the Force really just diminish with age? Or does it diminish with a lack of use, right? Is it like a muscle? It just atrophies after a while. And what this really looks like is the longer a Jedi goes without using the Force and the skills that it allows, they really do just become weaker. As time goes on, they become less capable. And I loved that. I love that they gave us an Obi-Wan Kenobi that really just had to rely on his wits and his capabilities, his fortitudes, absent any real use of the Force. I think it really showcases just how capable Obi-Wan Kenobi is as a character, as opposed to like, he's a Jedi Master who can do anything because he's got the Force, and he can just Jedi mind trick everybody and call it a day and rescue Princess Leia in like an hour and a half. Right? I mean, it's cool to see him, you know, literally use a blaster when he's running up on what's his name, the fake Jedi, which was a hilarious moment. Again, you know, I think that this really showcased how awesome he is as just a capable person, more so than just a guy who needs the Force and able to pull anything off. But again, nothing in the show was bad. It was not really disappointing. I didn't walk away from it saying like, man, this kind of sucks, you know? It was cool. And in a lot of ways, it was what I was expecting given the Disney shows that we've seen so far. Mandalorian was a very slow burn. Boba Fett was actually, it was slow to its own detriment. You know, so I expected this to be much the same way. It really seems to be the formula that Disney's following in relation to like their Star Wars franchises. I will say, I do think the first 2 episodes are going to be very divisive. And I think there's going to be a lot of people out there who absolutely thought they were great. And a lot of people who were just like, this was boring and it sucks. But I feel like that's really going to be where things split. But at the end of the day, like so many shows that come out now, especially when you're only talking about 6 episodes, right? Like 6 weeks, a month and a half, I think it is necessary to sit down and let the show run its course and to see where the show leads and just kind of allow us to see it go to its conclusion. Because I think in a lot of ways, it could feel very much like Loki, where Loki was slow in a lot of ways in the beginning. There were some action sequences, but there were times when I was in the show and I was like, okay, so like, where's this going? You know, and then you get to like the last 2 episodes and it's like, holy cow, right? Like WandaVision was the same way. WandaVision just kind of snaked along for the first 2 episodes, lost a lot of people. And then by the time you started getting halfway through the show, you're like, okay, things are kind of picking up. You get to the end, you're like, holy hell, right? So, you know, I really have a feeling that Obi-Wan's going to feel much the same way. So with that being said, guys, let me know what you think down in the comments, right? Were you a huge fan of it? Were you just kind of like, it's okay. You know, it's a thing that exists. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you all for watching. I will catch you all later. Peace.